Right, Sneh, Bharadwaj and myself just introduce a little bit about this abstract that we wrote. And I think she did bring in this concept of love thy neighbor, which is what she started the first line with. It talks about love thy neighbor attitude that Mumbai, which is called Mumbai now, it's Bombay, the city of Bombay, the way they caught on with each other, the way they looked after each other during the last bombing that took place at the Hotel Taj Mahal. And during all the last 5 years, all kinds of critical incidents and explosions that they have gone through. She does talk about the 2006 trains which have been bombed, and we had about 188 lives lost in one day. The perennial floods which come to Bombay, the 2011 terror attacks and 2008, that shook, of course, the whole of humanity around the world. But there was something that happens, as Nebosha did also mention. What happens is the very next day or 2 days later, people come up with statements, Bombay set to business. Bombay's life is as usual. It is not as usual. It's not as usual for a lot of people. It has returned to business. But this happens in various places. It happened in Kashmir, it happened in Karachi, Madrid, Peshawar, London, Wall Street, Washington. Terror is everywhere. There are a few questions that we would ask, a few hypotheses that we will leave, so that we have an opportunity for the next 3 years to deal with those hypothetical questions and develop some body of knowledge over a period of time. And Sneh, as I said, is a management scientist, and she will obviously also explain a little bit of the way in which she looks at resilience. She's taken that spiritual resilience part, and she will explain to us a bit as we go on. Then you had this question as to what do I address me as? Call me Venkat.
Yeah. Thanks, Venkat. Hello and a very good afternoon to all of you. So, Venkat has already introduced the topic. I take this topic from now onwards. We first start with the meaning of resilience in social and spiritual perspective. What we understand is both spiritual and social resilience, they stem from within the individuals, and they are impacted by inherent culture of various societies, value systems, traditions, customs, and temperaments of the communities involved. And then, resilience also tells and asks for patience, endurance, and coping from individuals involved. Both types of resilience, they stem from inside the sufferers. Sufferers in this study are the commoners, the common citizens of Mumbai, and practitioners. For practitioners, we turned our eyes to mendicants of Varanasi. Varanasi is the spiritual capital of India. And hence, resilience seems to be a direct result of the inherent culture. Yeah, we have already explained this.
Sure. One of the important things that we were looking at was, is there anything common between Bombay and Varanasi? And we said nothing is common between the two. There can never be anything common between the two. One is Bollywood, one is very expensive city, one has a whole lot of slums, one has a lot of people, and a lot of ills that you could see in a metropolitan environment if you were to look at it from a deficit's point of view. But if you were to look at it from what Mumbai is all about, and you've seen that movie, how many people have seen the recent movie? I won't even name it. It was all about Mumbai and Mumbai slums. What was that? Well, Slumlord Millionaire. It's not the millionaire part that we are talking about. The fact of the matter is, that is a movie about the resilience, and that is a movie about coping. That is a movie about coping. That's a city. How does that city become that city? That's one issue. How does Varanasi choose its own pace of constantly manufacturing, as well as retailing, religion, spirituality, subjects connected with that. I use these words, manufacturing as well as retailing, because there are people who live also by, marketing that stuff there. There's a whole industry in the temple town which lives by that. There's a whole industry in the temple town which does not believe in what they sell, but they just sell it because other people obviously require it. But there's also a whole lot of practitioners, as Sneh said, who are the mendicants, who happen to have chosen a different path. And they are, of course, in Varanasi, if you've ever been to, some are pretty good, and there can always be some bad apples, even among mendicants. Okay, we wouldn't be talking about the bad apples, but we'll be trying to see if there is anything that we can pick up and try and see the running of the threads between resilience and possibly coping as far as these two areas are concerned.
Well, we set certain objectives for ourselves when we started this study. First was to integrate the spiritual resilience of Varanasi mendicants and social resilience of common citizens of Mumbai and understand their cross connections. And second one was to understand the frugality and vulnerability of social and spiritual resilience, because the main question that this study proposes to bring up is resilience endlessly renewable? Yeah, Venkat.
That's a question. I don't know the answers at this point of time. I'm hoping I'll find some answers as we go on. And what I've tried to do was to see, when we both were talking to each other through emails as well as through telephone conversations, what we found was, whenever we need a test to find this is a resilient society or those people are coping, do we need an atomic explosion? Do we need a terrorist attack? Do we need a flood? Do we need a cyclone? Isn't it sad to test our questions, our theories, and our knowledge primarily based on those negative incidents and how we react to them? So I've started thinking in terms of, could we then shift our focus into something different? Could we, on the basis of some of the stuff that has happened, of course, man-made stuff is preventable. The natural stuff probably is not. When you go to Bay of Bengal and Bangladesh, every day the fishermen who go to the main seas with their trawlers or with their boats and when they want to go there to do the fish, they never know whether they're going to return. They would not stop during the rainy seasons or the monsoon seasons. People continue to do so. There are cyclone warnings, but people continue to do so both because of poverty and also because that's the only living that they know. There's a lot that those people teach us. But is there something that the rest of the society can make a difference? And it is in that context, probably in the next 2 years or so, we will try and spend some time on that very hypothesis, and hopefully the Institute would try to develop a little bit of a, can't call it a research collective, but an applied research collective which will look for renewable resilience materials which will be useful in our life as far as future is concerned.
Yeah, have a look at these photographs. These are the Varanasi mendicants. And Varanasi, as we already explained, is the spiritual capital of India, Mumbai being the commercial capital of India. So a stark contrast, one a spiritual capital, another the commercial capital. And Varanasi has been the land of salvation for ages for every Hindu that lives in India. Venkat, would you like to explain salvation or moksha?
Well, whether we need to do that. Salvation, and essentially I think in the Hindu philosophy they talk in terms of the cycle of birth and death and freeing yourself away from that. It's not a kind of a concept which is, a lot of people agree with, but there are ways by which one can redefine that in a context. Some people think in terms of salvation. I mean, the moksha part of salvation that we're talking about in the Indian context is being free completely from this process called birth and death. In other words, you're never going to be born or reborn. You're never going to have any sadness after. Well, whether that would happen, how you would deal with would be a huge discourse at a later stage, but essentially that's the kind of salvation. But I don't think we would need to go more into that part of it. What we would do is try and see how Bombay looks at salvation and what is their immediate purpose as to why they would move on. Yeah? Okay. That's similar to that?
Yeah. Accepting that we need to explain a little bit about their lifestyle. How do these Varanasi mendicants live, and what is their thought process, and how do they renunciate their family ties. They are supposed to abstain from sex the whole of their lives, and they would have a few positions. They would have a begging bowl and a set of saffron colored clothes which they usually wear. Apart from this, they are supposed to be wandering all their lives. In fact, to monks or to renunciates, what we affix as an adjective is wandering monks of India. Now, there is a logic behind this. Wandering, they are supposed to be wandering whole of their lives because staying at one place, as per Hinduism, develops some kind of attachment to that particular place. So to deprive that attachment, they are supposed to be shifting their, place.
The higher the detachment, the higher is a dispassionate way of dealing with what you are dealing with. If you own, the ownership is removed. If the ownership is removed from what we do, and if the ownership is transferred to the person who is actually part and parcel of your change processes that you do, that's what we would be getting. So it is in that context of attachment and detachment that you would find that you could be basically be relieved of what Buddhism calls as dukkha. Moving away from one of that would be detachment.
Yeah, Venkat, I would like to explain one particular types of mendicants, that is the Aghori mendicants. They are followers of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is a prominent Hindu god, and one of the sects who follow Lord Shiva, they are Aghori mendicants. Now, to overcome complete attachment from hatredness, from the feelings of hatred and disgust, you know what they do? They eat their own solid waste, they drink their urine, they eat that flesh. This is their way of overcoming hatredness and feeling of disgust. And then we have those naked sadhus who are called Naga sadhus in India, naked. They are completely naked, they don't wear even an inch of cloth. And they stay like that